So I invite you now to take a deep breath, to leave at the door what you can in your virtual space. Come, let us worship. Oops. And our prelude this morning is offered by Dick Doughty. Thank you, Dick. It's Erin Copeland welcomes us this morning. So welcome to visitors, friends, members. I'm Reverend Sue Browning. I serve the congregations in Easton, the Unitarian Universalist congregations in Easton and in Chestertown, and it is good to be together. We are a faith tradition that focuses on inclusion. Today, we're going to think what inclusion means across an age spectrum, across the stages that we all go through. So we invite you, wherever you are coming from, to bring your questions. If you're new, to check us out on our website, to email us, or to give us a call. So today is Valentine's Day. It's a day that comes with bright colors and with chocolates, and it feels like it's sort of a needed holiday in what's been a tough week. It's hard to watch our government go through impeachment. We have had gray day after gray day, and observations that there has been a lot of ice. So in that spirit, as we bring a Valentine mood, we also bring gratitude for all who helped pull together today's service. And our coffee hour today for both congregations will immediately follow. So it's good to be together. I light the chalice this morning with words from Betts Winnicky. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek what is good within and around us. Our opening hymn today is For All That Is Our Life. Hang on just a second. We're trying something. This part's a little different, so bear with us. We're going to show a screen as I talk, but let me just set the story up a little bit. So this Thoughts for All Ages today is about one of those times where somebody I didn't know had an idea. And then that idea came to be real. And it came to be real this morning. So that's the sort of exciting piece here. So it starts with a call I got in early January. Go back to that first week in January. We had the attack on the Capitol. But I picked up the phone call from somebody I didn't know. Her name was Robin. She sounded younger than I was, and I've since met her, so I now know that's true. And she had been referred to me by one of the county council members in Talbot County. She had this idea, she didn't know what to do with it. And he said, well, maybe Reverend Sue can help because she heads up the Talbot Association of Clergy and Laity. It's for folks in the Chestertown area, it's like CVMA, the Chester Valley Ministers Group. So I talked to Robin, and her basic idea was she was really inspired by the Bible passage in 1 John. I now know it's 4.7. Basically, it's a message that we should all love one another. That God is love and love is God. And she had this image, this visual, which you're going to see in just a second, that she really wanted to get out in the community and could I help? So she texted me the image, and now you're going to see the slides rather than be watching me as I talk through the rest of Thoughts for All Ages. So if we can bring up that first slide. So her image that she had created, and I now know, I didn't know at the time, it was an idea she had 16 years ago. And she had actually worked with a sign company in Talbot County back then, but had never done anything with it. But something was really speaking to her in early January. And I looked back at the date of our first communication. It was the day after the attack on the Capitol, and she just felt something needed to be done. So one thing led to the other, and one part of the story I want to tell is a place I screwed up, which is I told her I would call her back in a week with some ideas on how we might figure out how this might go on signs or get out in the community, and then I didn't call or text. Has anybody ever done that where you've made a commitment, you didn't follow through? I think sometimes at that point, we made a promise to one another. It's easier just to not do it. Maybe it will get forgotten. But something gnawed at me, and I got back in touch, and I realized I needed some help. So I called a woman named Wendy, who's a member at a different church, and said, could you work with Robin on this? Lots of texts and phone calls later. I want to take you to Friday. So if we go to the next slide, Bill. This is Robin. I finally had a chance to meet Robin, and we met at Wendy's church, somebody who wasn't involved in this project. And Robin now had a car full of these signs. And you're going to see what they look like in churchyards this morning around Talbot County. But it was just lovely to get to know each other because we do these things because of the relationships. So then let's go to the next slide. There's Robin looking at her sign, and at this point we had all three cars were lined up at the church, and it was cold. And then if you think of those election signs where you need to put the little sticks in there, we're trying to do that, our hands are cold. And then we split them up. We decided where they could be delivered, because part of the story is one thing I had was a list of representatives from Talbot County faith communities. I had put the call out Thursday night, does anybody want one of these signs? I put a message out that Wendy wrote, and we had gone through the 12 signs we ordered by Friday morning, or we had one more Saturday, and now there's more people that want them than we can deliver, and so we're looking at that next stage of funding. So Bill, if we can just look through the next couple of slides. That's Robin and I as we're gearing up to put those little sticks that go in them. And then the next one, this is Wendy. There's now, that's at Idlewild Park. There's a sign there. And then Bill and I didn't do our homework Friday night. We know, we've heard great stories. Robin met a pastor at his home and dropped off signs. Wendy happened to be dropping one off in Oxford right as the church bells rang. But Bill and I waited till it was cold and rainy. So let's see the next ones that we delivered. This is at St. Stephen's in Unionville. It's an AME church with a long history. It's a beautiful sanctuary. I put it by their offices and then figured they could move them. They're really interested in getting some more. And finally, we should have the sign we dropped off at Third Haven at the Quaker Meeting House. So I think that's the end of our slides, right, Bill? Yeah. So what I'm hoping folks take away is from early January, from 16 years ago, somebody had an idea. She didn't know what to do. She asked, and it wasn't that comfortable to call me, I'm sure. She didn't know me. And then I made some calls and we invited more in, and it actually became something real. And I know sometimes we talk about it takes work, whether we're talking about dismantling racism or working through all sorts of projects together. But to bring something from an idea to something real takes lots of communication. It takes lots of people inviting one another. And then it comes back in these joyful texts as people were delivering the signs and we were getting requests for more. So we look forward to seeing how this project blossoms out. I've read a lot more on 1 John 4:7. We'll actually talk about it a little bit next week in our service. So that's what I'd like to share with our youngest learners today. So as we enter into our conversation on stages and ages, or ages and stages, I invite us now into our time of reflection, our time of meditation. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, help us remember us, our own selves at different ages and stages of our lives. Help us call into the center the places of hope, the places of vitality, times of questions, places of wisdom. Let us come together in our sense of community, bringing all of those experiences, all of that reflection into this moment. We take a moment to reflect on how those lenses have influenced our understanding of the past week, our challenges to democracy, our sense of how vaccines are rolled out, our sense of children figuring out schools, teachers figuring out schools. Hold for a moment this week in the many experiences we each bring every time we gather. Amen, and blessed be. Now is the time in our service where we have a chance to share our acknowledgements of the heart, a chance to light candles for our experiences, our personal milestones, times of sorrow, times of joy. It's how we build community, by learning bits and pieces of each other's stories. So I'm going to light the first candle, as we have now for close to a year, thinking about all the different ways the pandemic affects our lives. Sounds that we've got our joys and sorrows, our acknowledgements of the heart represented here today. Let's take a moment and hold what we've heard and that which remains in your heart. Blessings. Our music before the sermon today, as we think again through the sense of ages and stages, is from Dan Fogelberg. Our anthem will now be played.
Darkness obscures the trail. courting disaster, measureless nights forebode, moments of rest, glimpses of laughter are treasured along the road. Along the road, your steps may stumble, your thoughts may start to stray, but through it all, a heart held humble measures and lights your way. Joy at the start, fear in the journey, joy at the coming home. A part of the heart gets lost in the learning, somewhere along the road. Somewhere along the
Thank you, Ellen. We now have a reading, and Annie Lavin will do our reading this morning.
Good morning. This is a reading from Elizabeth Marshall Thomas's book entitled Growing Old. For me, old age as a dangerous disease stays somewhere in my brain, a nuisance that began when I was in my late 40s, about to be in my early 50s, which seemed old at the time. It was then I began adding a year to my age, so that on my birthday, I'd be comfortable with the new number rather than being stricken by it. I've done that ever since. At the time of this writing, I say I'm 88, even though I'm 87. And on my birthday, when I'll really be 88, which is pretty close to 90, I'll be used to the idea and can prepare for being 89. Maybe I'll even say I'm 90, because while 89 is old, 90 is really, really old and could take 2 years to adjust to. 90 looks to me like 50 did when I was in my 40s. Why do this when death doesn't concern me? Or so I believe. Maybe death isn't the problem. Maybe I want to slow my deterioration by being younger than I say I am. Maybe if I'm still okay at 87, I'll be okay at 88, and pretending I'm there already might just assure this. Reality can be disturbing, and sometimes avoiding it helps. For instance, rather than waiting until my car is empty of gas, I fill the tank when it's half full, because this costs less than filling the tank when it's almost empty. My reasoning may be imperfect, but the illusion of saving money sure feels good. The same principles apply to aging, but feels is the key word here. I need the same amount of gas no matter when I buy it, and even though I'm not as old as I say I am, this doesn't mean I'm still not declining.
Thank you, Annie. For folks who haven't read Elizabeth Marshall Thomas's book, she is actually an anthropologist, and she said, you know, I'm going to write a book, and if people keep writing about aging, I think somebody who is actually of that age should be doing the writing, and it's actually a very fun book. So everyone who's alive today is some age. As measured in years and months and days, there is a number. And we might or might not look our numerical age, or at least we may not hope that's the case, who knows? Somehow age does that to us. We sometimes play those tricks and games. But I do bet that if we put up a picture on the screen here, and I put 4 pictures across, and I put a 2-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 100-year-old, I'm pretty sure we would all be able to sequence who was the youngest and who was the oldest. And we do use that number. We do use our numerical age to make some basic determinations. It determines when you can drive and vote or start school. It turns out of late, it's a really important age when you go to determine eligibility for vaccines. And whether you're 65 or over or 75 or over, sets a prioritization. It's not that all of us are aging the exact same way or that that's the perfect way to metric, but it's a rough justice idea. So I just want to put on the table that age is real. I think everybody knew that, but sometimes good to say these things. But there's also physical variation. I was reading about a gentleman named Fujas Singh, and he was a man who began running marathons. If anybody wants to start training as soon as the ice is gone, he started running marathons, 26 miles, when he was 89. And he ran them until he was 100. He actually has a record in the 90 plus category. They actually have a whole category for running marathons for folks that are over 90 of 5 hours and 40 minutes. He commented on a marathon he ran when he was 93 and said, the first 20 miles are not difficult. As for the last 6 miles, I run talking to God. So clearly he's not the norm, and we see prodigies that can play piano sonatas and everything at age 6. That's not generally the way it goes, but I think we need to know that we've got that numerical age and there's a lot of variation around it. But what about the other ways that humans develop? There has been a ton of work done on our emotional and our social development. And in some super oversimplified view, it basically starts with an understanding that infants learn from what's closest to their senses. Anything they can't actually feel is the broad universe out there. And if their needs are kept and met and cared for, they build trust. Eventually, children separate themselves from their caregivers. They can tell themselves from someone else. They can't always empathize right away, though that comes pretty early, and as does our ability to solve problems. And importantly, in human development, when we start putting it all together, we have the ability to develop social relationships. So that's sort of that beginning part of human development. We go through some sort of stages, not that linearly, but at some point, we've all addressed those types of issues. But then what happens after those early years? And even those early years, I think, are a mixed bag how that all goes. But as adults, I think we circle back through some of those same stages. We ask, what can we trust? What is it that we can trust? What do I need to stay engaged in life? And we ask questions about where we have choices and where there are limitations. So when I think of aging, I don't want to just think of some of the places that we age closer to the end of life, but the recognition that we are all aging from day one and adapting time and again. I think sometimes we oversimplify, and there's a real risk in doing that. David Brooks, I think folks know him as a commentator, has written a lot, and he wrote the book, The Second Mountain, A Quest for a Moral Life. And he talks about the first mountain as being the time where sort of that first half of life where people have more personal goals and worldly success and career ambition, and a second half of life, and it can be triggered by just many things, where people abandon themselves to what he calls a greater cause. Instead of figuring out what they want for themselves, they think about what the world needs for him. And, you know, as he thinks about that as a midlife shift, it seemed, frankly, as I've read it and thought about it, just a little bit too much of a clean break, a clean story. People write a lot about aging. I'm going to question Brooks's assumptions in just a minute, but it's interesting, if you Google books on aging, you get a plethora of stuff on what to do sort of age 70 and beyond to make it all go well. But as I said, I think when we have these trajectories, whether it's David Brooks' model or different pieces, we start thinking that there's this path through life, and that's how we measure ourselves. Are we doing the right thing giving to the world? Are we doing the right thing here or there? And I think that's limiting. I think any time we think that there's one way to be, I know last week Easton talked about gender identity, and it's a real recognition of fluidity. I think the fact that we can always be in both places at the same time. We can have multiple things going on. So I haven't tested this, but I'm going to ask us 3 questions today. And at each point, you'll have a chance. Feel free to jot a little something down, because I think I may have come up with, maybe reading pieces of these books, some questions that are at least helpful for me as I think about the stages of our life, not as much the numerical age. So my first question is, when have you had a time in your life where you felt really confident, really assured of what you were doing? Think back. Remember that sense. I was thinking here of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law married young and had 4 children. She raised her kids in the place she was born in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and she lived out her values at church. She was at every church fair. She would have had every cookie sale and every band costume repaired and cookie sale done. But then her husband got sick, Bill's dad. And she went to a job initially that was sort of where you might have expected she needed to work, and she became the Sunday school director, the Christian ed director at the church. But then it was in her mid-50s that she became the director of a small, long-standing social service agency in Portsmouth. She was the director. She had never attended college, and here she was managing programs in a budget. She addressed the needs of her clients. She had to answer to a board. And as I checked in with Bill's sibling yesterday, you know, it was stressful and it was rewarding. And when we went to her retirement, she was in her mid-60s by then, the mayor was there, all the brass in town were there. I think she was always amazed at the turn her life took. And I think she was amazed that she had actually stepped into and risen to that turn. So I ask us all, think about those times when you felt confident, from the high school athlete who's at their peak, or the elder running a marathon. I think sometimes confidence comes in moments of truth and action when we step up, but I also think confidence can be a way of being. This past week, I wrote about kindness in the minister's column, and Carol Meredith offered a comment, and I asked her to share a little bit. So I want to make sure we take a chance here to spotlight Carol and ask her to share what she thought about kindness.
If I could use only one word to describe my...
Hang on just a second, Carol. Let me see if we can get you up here. Bill? Maybe not. Go ahead. There. Carol, I think if you talk now, it'll work.
Okay. If I could use only one word to describe my mother, it would be that she was kind. She was shy and quiet. She had no friends. She didn't socialize. But there was something about her that I remember her as being very quiet, as very kind. She always greeted strangers with a warm smile and some nice words. She took care, she checked in on an elderly neighbor. She took care of a stray cat, and she even helped out in a thrift shop, which I thought was very brave of her. And one time we were watching a movie, Lars and the Real Girl, and she was 89, and at the end of it's a story about a man who sends off for a real live, for a mannequin that's just like a real live person, and he takes care of her like she's a real person. And at the end of the movie, my mom and I discussed it. And this 89-year-old woman who had been brought up in the Victorian age thought there was nothing wrong with this, that this was something that this man had needed at the time, and that was fine with her. So my mom was no hero, didn't do anything spectacular, but she was just a very kind woman. So to me, the word kindness actually means more than the word love.
Thank you, Carol. I think there's lots of times when we think about our confidence and assurance, because I think we need those times. So I have a second question for us today. Can you think back to a time, a stage, or a situation where you had a time of serious doubt? Maybe it was doubts around something big, your beliefs in human nature, your assumptions about a friend. Is there ever a time you felt left out? Maybe you were young, maybe not so young. Have you ever had regrets? Because I think doubt, the same way we have confidence and assurance, I think that doubt can be a universal experience. It's partnered with uncertainty and worry in times of discontinuity. Remember a time that may have been a part of your life. I think those times, as you take a moment and think about that, are often times that are tied to our own security. We worry about our families or our vaccine. We worry about our own direction. So I think through all stages, we can go through this phase of doubt. And I think doubt is closely connected to humility. It's a place of deep reflection at times of values and priorities, and I don't think it just happens at one stage in life or another. This week, we have watched the trial of the former president, and we now know the results, and it was a serious event. I had hoped, I knew that it was a bit of a stretch, but it's a good place when you're asked serious questions to come with your doubt, to come with your questions and then find your place of decisions. And the senators did. What I think is interesting is our youngest senator now is 33 years old. And we have two senators that are 87. We span a large group and we ask for discernment across that spectrum. And it's good to remember, I think, that wisdom does come with age, and yet it's not the only way it comes. I'm also aware, when I think of the younger leaders among us, there's a lot of stories on John Lewis, but today is the 3rd anniversary of the Parkland shooting. There's 17 kids, or 17 people were killed. And leadership arose, needing some support, but the voices that we listened to 3 years ago as we chose to attend the March for the Rally And when we think of AOC in Congress, there are younger voices that are setting a path, and that has always been true in history. I think that sense that we play when we're young and we're wise when we're old is limiting. So my third question, and I only have 3 here. When do you remember a stage or an age in your life that was defined by curiosity and exploration? What is a place that a lot of folks live with a lens of curiosity? When was that the biggest part of the story you might told? Because I think across the ages and stages, joy or something close to that arises when we make space for not only curiosity and exploration, but risk. We may lean into the beginnings of an unknown adventure with the undertaking and anticipation. And frankly, I think some of that has been missing during the pandemic. Joy, curiosity and exploration can be a stance we take in times when we need change. So maybe you can come up with that example, because I think we need a wide toolkit of examples. Because when I think of curiosity and exploration, there's often the excitement about a beginning and the reality of an ending. Places, it may be free to let go of something. There may be relief. We may be letting go of possessions, but there's often also sadness. So I think through our stages. I think through assuredness and doubt and curiosity. And I think we limit ourselves to think that they happen at one age or another. I've been wondering sometimes how we judge others by their age. Where do we make an assumption? Sometimes it might be in church life, and we're thinking of a leadership position, and we assume that person their career won't allow it, or their status in their family, or their caregiver role. Something will stop them because we assume they're at that phase of their life. And yet, many folks say yes when asked. We have someone who's stepped up to help focus on care for the building. It's a 70-year-old woman in Easton. We have our tech team this year, and I talk often about our tech team and the way it emerged, but it has people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, week after week, figuring out stuff. So age is real, but I don't think it needs to be defining, or at least not the most important thing. I think when folks do age, we make assumptions that people are lonely or alone or something's going on, and that may or may not be true for them. I think there is some wisdom in different parts of aging where you slow down and have the confidence to pay attention more, but that's not the only way that we pass through life. So all of the things I've been talking about today are sort of about us, how we feel, how we're aging, what our experiences have been. But it was interesting, I was looking through a reading about navigating 12 stages of life called The Human Odyssey, and it invites us to think of age from the other direction. Where are our various ages and stages needed to form community? How are we needed just as we are, with our experience, with our age? How are we needed for one another? He notes that each stage of life has its own unique gift to give to humanity. We need to do whatever we can to support each stage. And again, I think we spiral through these stages one at a time. We don't want to suppress individual contributions. We want to make sure we all have the energy to play and that we're looking for wisdom in one another. And I think our faith journey also has ages and stages, but they also bump around. From our youngest ages, we wonder, what is that universe? How are we going to trust it? Young children are witnesses. They are trying to make sense of the others, and they do it in concrete ways. They do it by hearing stories, by hearing examples, by talking to them and understanding all the wisdom they have to offer. And over time, they start with some sort of intuitive sense of right and wrong, and they're starting to frame that. And then they get more complex in their thinking and ask questions about the greater mysteries. I think we all continue to ask these questions all the way through. And I think the pandemic has changed our relationship with time just a little bit. Understanding that a better part of this year, we may have been more internally focused on our homes or externally focused by what we've been watching on TV or on Netflix. But this has been a discontinuity point, a point to reflect on where we are in understanding the stages that we go through. I think my hope as we go through and think about human development, if we think about the reality of our age and the ways we continue to change and enrich not only our own life, but each other's lives, is that we make space. We make space for the wisdom of the youngest, the playfulness of the elders, and everything in between, with fewer assumptions and more grace. I think grace comes when we see everyone for who they are, when we see how we're each bringing something different that is needed right now, even if we don't quite understand and know that. It's in these lessons, I hope, we go forward and reflect on times we felt confident, times we've doubted, and especially times we've lived in curiosity. May it be so, and blessed be. In the spirit of recognizing all of our ages, our final music today is going to be offered by Eamon Peach. And I told Eamon through Ellen a little bit about what the sermon was about. And this is the music he picked for us to reflect on. Thank you, Eamon. We do have a minute. We're going to do just a couple of announcements here, and then we will close our service. And in coffee hour, we can continue with the questions and hear some stories from one another on our stages of life. Christina, I believe you have some announcements. And Dave Beeler, you'd be afterwards if you have any.
Yes. So
Bill will spotlight you in just a second, or else take me off spotlight so we can hear you.
So in support of our commitment to fight racism, UUFE has joined other churches in Talbot County to support the Move the Monument work by displaying signs for this cause, to remove the Confederate Talbot Boys Monument from the courthouse lawn here in Talbot County. Also, another announcement is that given the confusion and challenges of vaccination rollout, a group of UUFE volunteers have offered to include in UU Life each week updated announcements about local vaccine opportunities. And also they volunteered to help people who might need assistance with pre-registering online or for a vaccine, for a ride to get to the vaccine. So just stay posted, stay tuned to UU Life for more details.
Thank you. Dave Beeler, do you have any announcements?
If I can unmute myself here.
Okay, I think if you talk, it'll work now.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah. Our family that we were sort of helping to get into the attainable housing got in last week finally, and thanks to the Social Justice Committee for making a lot of that happen and making their improving the life of a family that's well deserved. And also, I guess the cookies, as somebody already talked about, are going to be distributed and on our way to some of our friends in Easton, which we're really happy to do. And somebody surprised me, said this is now going to be an annual event. Did I hear somebody say that?
Wasn't probably Jane Hardy.
No, probably not.
So yeah, thank you. And Chestertown is in the midst of its stewardship drive. I'm sure the Pledge Committee Stewardship Campaign would love to hear from everyone. And Easton is collecting cereal, so make sure to drop that off. And if you can't do it on a Friday night, we can figure out a way for you to drop it by during the day. Just let the office know and we can coordinate it somehow. So now I think we'll go back to me and we will end our service with these closing words from Scott Taylor. May we go with courage, hungry for a curiosity that challenges and changes us, knowing that our answers are never complete, and it's the questions that make us whole. Go in peace, go in love. Go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go. Now have our benediction.